speaker is Chris, who's going to give us a talk about Azure and how good it is. So, over to you.
Thank you very much. So before we start, my name is Chris. I work as a consultant, as I said before. I do all sorts of things from mobile development to web apps to back-end code to data processing, so it's quite exciting. Today I will be speaking to you about Windows Azure. Windows Azure is the Microsoft cloud platform. How many people, with the exclusion of the Amazon guys, know about cloud technologies? Have worked with cloud technologies? Show of hands. Anybody work with Windows Azure? Okay, it's not instant then. AWS? Right, okay. So it's not too far away from AWS, it's just another kind of service, same as what Google Cloud Service have to offer. So Windows Azure, as I said, it's the Microsoft cloud platform. It's the idea behind this cloud technology is to make us developers. So we'll be focusing on the developer because there's a lot of aspects with the cloud technology. So today, as developers, the interesting thing is that we can move a lot faster when we use Azure. We can save a lot of money. And for people that already are in companies where they have already on-premises equipment, then there's a nice way to create a hybrid platform or even migrate everything to the cloud. The benefits with Azure is the fact that they have a lot of data centers. They have about 25 data centers, which I think at the moment puts them in the lead for everything. And that means that if you are thinking about creating an app, and if you're thinking about having a website somewhere, then you don't want to serve your clients only from UK or only for in Asia. You can serve them from everywhere. So right now you have Australia, Asia, Europe, and a lot of places in the US where it started from. The idea behind Azure is that you only pay for what you use, which is quite nice. It means that you can keep the cost down, and it also allows you to manage how much money you spend every month on the service that you're using. You pay no upfront costs, so you can register for free. There's no need to enter a credit card, and the idea is that as soon as you register, you get £125 of free credit, which might not sound too much, but if we start discussing about the cost, you'll see that it's quite a lot of money to get you through, especially if you're a developer. You get charged per minute, so anything that you run as a service on the platform means that it gets charged by the minute. So if you're only using it for 15 minutes a day to test something quickly, then that's how much money you're going to pay. Or I think it rounds up to the closest minute, which is quite good. There's no charge for VMs, so if you decide to spin up a couple of VMs to test something very quickly, say like test 10 VMs and see the load, then you spin them up, you run them, and then you shut them down. You don't have to destroy them and start all over again. The idea is that as soon as they stop, then you don't have to pay anything extra. Again, saving money, that's the idea. We save the cost. And if you're a developer and you wanting to test the technology, then I believe that it's quite nice knowing that you're not going to be charged for things that you want to test. Right, so there's a lot of offerings on the Azure platform. We have the platform as a service and the infrastructure as a service. Infrastructure as a service is something like, so if we use an analogy of a car, for infrastructure as a service, you actually own the car. You have to run it, and make the maintenance, change the tires, things like that. So that's your virtual machines, for example. That's your Active Directory. If you are needing to use a virtual machine, which some companies do because of the amount of the work that you need to perform, or because the platform doesn't support it, then in that case you can have a choice between Microsoft or Linux servers. There's no limitation there. You can upload your own images if you want to. So if you have on-premises servers and you want to replicate that on the cloud, you can do it. You get flexible workload support, and then you also have virtual private networks, which means that if you want to deploy your own cluster, or if you want to deploy a number of servers, then it's fairly easy to do. Load balancing, you get automated load balancing. You can define your rules, and the idea is that you put your servers behind the load balancer, you put your workload behind the load balancer, and if anything fails, then automatically manages that for you. You have a lot of control of how you set it, which is quite good, because there's a lot of flexibility on how you want the load balancer to behave. So it can be fully automated, and you don't have to do anything, and you can go down all the way to how you define your rules. And obviously, as I said, there's the virtual network, which means that you have a lot more control. You can have your own IPs. You can have a connection to your hybrid network as well. So you can have some on-premise servers and some servers on the cloud. And you can make them as part of the virtual network, which creates a nice flexibility. For example, we have a SQL cluster. We want to work with servers on premises and on the cloud. So, Active Directory. Active Directory is for managing identities. So, people that want to log into your enterprise, there is the option now to have an online or a cloud-based Active Directory. You can even have a hybrid Active Directory. So, some of the functionalities on the premises and some of them are on the cloud. Now, why is it important for developers? The idea behind it is that it doesn't only provide Active Directory for an organization. You can also use things like third-party integration with social media. So if you want to have a Twitter or a Google account to authenticate to your organization, you can implement that through the Active Directory. And also if you have an app that you're developing and you want to do single sign-on, or if you want to do third-party logins using social media, social accounts, then Active Directory supports it. And the API is quite easy to use. And it sounds also, say if you have a Salesforce running somewhere, you want to be able to, your application to authenticate against Salesforce, then you can go to the Active Directory. So, the focus of the platform is on creating apps or writing code and deploying as quickly as you can, especially for developers that want to have some brushing with the cloud or do want to test things around. It's quite easy to set up. It's fairly small, but the idea is that it's quite open as a technology stack. You can use .NET, you can use Java, you can use Node, you can use PHP, Python, and then there's mobile ports. So there's a native port for iOS and Android. There's also support for Xamarin if anybody is doing .NET Xamarin mobile application development. And there's other things like media where you can get direct language. So the languages I spoke about, they do provide native SDKs. On top of that, for everything that you do on Azure, there's a REST API. So if you don't want to use the native stuff and you're more comfortable using a REST API, then it means that you can go directly to the service that you wish to connect and run your code. Right, this is a particularly interesting slide because although it doesn't include everything from an application building perspective, there's most of the important blocks over here. HD inside as the Hadoop cluster if you want to create that for querying. There's a SQL database, which I'll be talking about later on. Storage, which is like table storage, blobs. Traffic manager for managing the traffic to your websites. Active Directory, which we mentioned before. DocumentDB, which is the equivalent of NoSQL on the cloud. So if you have your own VM running, say, a NoSQL database, you can just use this one. You got machine learning, which can take advantage of any backend data that you might have. So if you're a single developer, probably you don't have that much data, but if you're a big company and you have masses and masses in terms of historic data, you want to do some analytics on top of that, then you can deploy machine learning and get some analytics out of your data. There's caching, including Redis cache, so not just the Microsoft implementation of the cache, but you can use that for anything, for websites or for your mobile applications. There's a CDN, so if you have a lot of images, you can take advantage of the CDN services they have across the globe, so it's a lot cheaper for you to reduce your traffic. There's a Key Vault service, which has just been introduced in beta, and that allows you to store very sensitive information on a hardware managed secure environment. And there's a .NET API, and there's a REST API. In effect, it means that if you have any application doing secure management, you need to store your keys somewhere securely outside your app or your environment, then you can use this service to do it, which is quite interesting and allows you to improve the security of your platform. There's recently everything that was like websites and mobile network, they've all been renamed under the API apps. So you now have web API apps, which allows you to create your own REST service to share data. There's a web app, which allows you to deploy code like PHP or .NET, ASP or Node. And there's logic apps which allow you to get your logic apps allow you to create apps that in effect it's a drag and drop environment where you say I've got Salesforce here and I've got my web app here and I want to combine the two. I want them to communicate, but I don't want to write all the underlying services. And it's quite nice because this one does it for you, and every single day there's more services being added. And finally, there's containers. As of announced recently, we have Docker support on Azure, which means that you can spin up as many Linux VMs you want on top of Docker. And there was a discussion recently where Docker is going to support Microsoft VMs, in which case you can spin up as many containers with microservices running on that container. A few more things now about the building blocks that most of you might be using. So first of all, we got SQL database. That's a relational database that you can use on the cloud. It doesn't. The nice thing about it, you don't have to own the hardware. You don't have to have any licenses. You don't have to worry about the upgrades. The current version supports SQL Server 2015, which is the latest. And just to give you an idea about how much this costs, Troy Hunt, which is a security analyst, he's running a service where he gets all the stolen private information, all the passwords and all the accounts that have been owned by hackers and have been posted onto Bitbucket. He collects all the information and puts it on a website called Have I Been Owned, where you go and subscribe by your email, and then if your account ever shows up on some hacked site, then you will get notified saying your email has been hacked, go and change your account. Now, this guy collects a lot of information. As of the last post, he had 148 million records inside on his database, and he did a research about how much it would cost for him to have his own SQL servers or use the SQL servers on Azure and then use the SQL database. It went from a couple of thousands of dollars per month to costing him £8 a month to host 100 gigabytes of data and querying them at 10 million times a month. So just imagine that if you have 2 gigabytes of data sitting anywhere on Azure on a SQL database, then you're probably going to be charged pennies for it for the month, which means that as a single developer, if you want to take advantage of the cloud technologies, it's very cheap. It's about 0.01 pence a day for up to 2 gigabytes of data. Next one, we have websites. Now, websites you can use, as I said before, ASP.NET, which is the .NET technology. Then you use Node.js or PHP. You can integrate with Git or FTP or TFS. You can deploy that automatically if you get some your own tools. Recently, they announced a collaboration with Dropbox. So if you have your code on Dropbox and you tie that with Azure, then as soon as you deploy something new on your Dropbox, then that will be pushed to the live site, and that means that your code automatically gets deployed. And one of the nice benefits is that websites, as with all the other services, are very easy to scale up. As in the old days, you would have to call Dell and say, I want 3 more servers for my rack, and then it will take 4 days or 3 days or 1 day to deploy. Now you can go onto the site, log in, and use the slider over there and say, I want to add a few more instances, and I want to have a higher CPU, and within seconds you have deployed a lot more instances on your service, scaling up. Now, obviously, you need to write your apps to scale horizontally rather than vertically. And by horizontally, I mean you deploy a lot more instances running your website rather than having a much faster machine running your site. But if you start off from the scratch, from early days, and you know that you're going to be scaling horizontally, then it's quite easy to take advantage of this technology. And then you can also have auto-scale, so if you know that your traffic has a certain pattern, so people log in the morning, they check your site, and then it gets quiet during the day and then again in the afternoon, then you can scale that or schedule the scaling up and down of the services, in which case you also save money as part of the management. Another service that they offer on Azure is the Visual Studio Online. It's free for any company that generates less than 1 million a year and have less than 5 users, so it's up to 5 users. And the idea behind it is that you have a full-blown management system for your code. So you can use a Team Foundation server, which is the new version of SourceSafe for Microsoft, or you can use Git if you don't want to use TFS, and most people tend to do that, and they're quite happy. There are tools out there to have source control. You can do agile project management, so you can have your whole Kanban board over there, and people can work. There's rooms for speaking to each other, all built in and all free for you to use. So if you want to set up a project and work on a mobile app, for example, and you want to use some agile methodology to track your performance or to track your tickets and issues and all that, then you can quite happily use Visual Studio Online. You can add external users. If you have a client, for example, you can give them access to generate tickets and bugs and so on. So it's quite nice, even if you are a single developer or a small company, to use these tools. And they're also part of the functionality. Now, storage is another thing that I like to use quite a lot. Storage consists of table storage, which is something like a slimmed down SQL version. So you have relational data, more or less. But the idea is that you have flat tables. So you have different tables sitting around, and you can use one of the APIs that are built for your language, or you can use REST. So if you want to pull your data using a REST service on a mobile phone or a mobile app, you don't have to rely on SDKs. You can directly use REST, which is quite handy. Blobs, you can use blobs to store, for example, images, and then what you can do from that is you can use either JSON or you can use HTTP and directly access those blobs to get your images out, so you don't have to have storage on your machine storing all these images for your website. There's also queues at the back of the storage, which I haven't put here. So if you want to create your own queuing system, then there's already a built-in framework for that. And again, because you can use REST, it doesn't tie you down to a specific language. You can go anywhere you go. And finally, there's an import and export service for physical devices. So if you create a DHC image or a VM of any of your servers or any of your machines, they can easily upload it onto one of the blob containers. And the idea is that you can use that to spin up a VM on the cloud. So if you want to migrate stuff, or if you want to push a lot of data out, then it's quite easy to use the upload service. And the other way around, you can always export VHDs and run them locally on your network. So that's more or less what I have to say. The idea behind Azure, I think it's the very low entry barrier. There's no requirements for you to put a credit card down and start paying for things that you don't want to pay. Actually, when you register for the first time, and even if you put a credit card, you can say, I want to have a zero cost. So it means that if you try to use something that you're not supposed to, you'll get a warning saying you have actually specified that you don't want to have any charges on your card, so go and change your account if you want to, otherwise you're not going to be charged for anything. Another nice trick that I found recently was that you can run free websites on Azure using the web apps. It means that you can have 10 free websites on any single data center. And because they have 25 different data centers, that means you can have 250 different websites running across the globe. And you don't get charged for that. So it's quite easy to get started if you're thinking about doing some cloud development. And what I'm going to show you now is just a little bit of the portal and how it looks like. And also a very nice way to calculate your costs if you're thinking about upfront costs and how much things are going to cost you. So say if you want to have a full-blown SQL server running on the service, or if you want to have your own VM, then you can easily calculate based on the size of the platform or the service that you're using, how much you're going to be charged. So with that. First of all, let's do the pricing model. So if you go to the Azure portal, just type Azure on any search engine and it will come up with the website. There's a pricing page, and in here there's a pricing calculator. And once you go in there, you'll see that you can choose what kind of service you want to use, and based on that, so let's just do, for example, the VM. There's different tiers on the service as well, which means that depending on how much demand you have, you can scale up and scale down. The nice thing is that once you scale up, you can always scale down, and there's no requirement for you to not do that. So in this case, I'm going to go for a very basic 1 core and 768 megabytes of RAM. Just to deploy one instance, it will cost me 9.98 euros. I don't know why that's euros, but which is probably around £7 a month for your own VM. The idea behind VM is if you want to run services that are related to each other, like you want to host your own SQL Express database or your own NoSQL database on a VM and want to deploy a website on top of that, then or multiple websites that can speak to the same database, then it's quite cheaper to do it like that rather than having to deploy different instances on a more expensive tier. So some people opt to do that, but the problem with VMs always is the fact that you have to maintain the VM yourself. So you have to do the Windows updates or the Linux updates or whatever you need to do in order to run things. As I said before, you can work around here and see what services you want to use and how much they will cost you. One important thing to note is that with Azure, some services may not have an upfront cost to use, but you do pay for the connections that you do. So any request coming in as a REST API or through the .NET SDK or your Node SDK, then it will have some charges. In which case, it might be handy for you to have things contained in one VM because there's no connections between your database and your web application. There are a lot of things that you can work around to save costs. Again, pinching the pennies is what it's all about, and as developers and as a freelance, I understand how important it is. And now going to the portal, there are 2 portals at the moment. Yes, there are. They are migrating again, so that's the 3rd iteration, I think, of the portal. This one is all written in HTML5. As you'll see here, that's the dashboard that you get presented as soon as you log in, and straight away you see how much I've spent so far in the month and how much I've got left. That's my live account. I don't get a free account for anything. And you can create new stuff from here. Again, you have a full drop down of all the options that you can use. I'm not going to do that now, but just to show you an idea, it's once you go into browse all, you can have all sorts of applications there. It's quite easy to manage. Now, if you don't like that, and there are a few things that currently don't work on the newest website, then you can always jump onto the older one. Let me just go into the dashboard. So down here, there's an Azure portal which points to the older 2nd generation portal, and this one is here. It's exactly the same thing as you were seeing before, slightly different format. And there are some services that still have not been migrated across. So if you're looking for things that have on the documentation and you can't find them, then make sure that you're pointing to the right portal. And again, here we have a full list of all the stuff that you have deployed. And if you want to create something new, there's a big, massive button on here. There's a lot of things that you can also get for free. Like if you want just a basic WordPress website, then there's already templates for you to do that. So you don't have to go through setting everything up yourself. And there's always new stuff being added. Right, so for the end, I've got to give 2 Pluralsight passes for a month to the first 2 people that have a question to ask me. That's me. Thanks. Go on, please.
So I'm not actually angling for green pads. So it does look like, just looking at it, it looks a lot more straightforward than the Amazon AWS.
It does indeed. It does.
But I noticed as well that there's an offering of Linux instances as well as Windows instances.
There are, yes.
So how many features do you lose when you go?
How many? Sorry, how many?
How many of the nice sort of easy to use features do you lose out on if you want to run Linux servers rather than Windows servers?
Right, for the services, so the platform as a service where you say I want to run a website on Node, you have no idea what it's running on. It could be running on an old Linux that you have no idea. That's the beauty of it. When you use the platform as a service, which is the websites and the mobile apps and the logic apps and everything else, it takes all that away from you. It's totally abstracted. It's only when you want to go down to a specific VM or a specific functionality, like deploy Redis on a VM on a Linux, that's when you do that. But other than that, it's totally abstracted for you. You have no idea what it's running on. And that's the beauty of it. I'm pretty sure that most of the stuff is running on Linux because it's faster and cheaper for them. But it's there. And there's no reason for you not to be able to upload your own stuff. So if you want, there's I think it's called VM Depot, where people go and contribute images of Linux or other stuff, and you can grab that and deploy it straight onto Azure. It's actually optimized for Azure as well. There's a button that says deploy to Azure, so it requires your credentials and then automatically deploys it for you. Other things are quite nice is, so if you have your Nodes app deployed, there's a tool to automatically push to Azure if you want to. So yeah, there's nothing that you lose. Just gain a pass. Just come around and see me afterwards. Any other questions, guys? Please.
So what's the equivalent of when you want to deploy a stack, like you have Amazon information, that sort of thing, where you draw a whole series of things connected together. How do you deploy that as a unit and manage that as a unit?
Can you give us an example? So the question was
say you
how.
have a typical stack where like you want it to have like a web server and a database and this sort of thing.
Okay. I think there are. If you're going to go the Linux way, there are already images ready for you. A LAMP stack, for example, if you want to do that, then that's fine. I think it's a lot more modular over here, so you pick and choose what you want to use, and that also allows you to bring down the cost, and you have full control of what's happening. It might not be as easy to get started, but the documentation is quite in depth. Even for beginners, the steps are quite comprehensive, and it's quite easy to set up your own stack. I think every time I used it, it's always been a case of pick and choosing the right tools for the right job. I hope that answers it. Please.
I'm always trying to find the way of putting VMs around different places around the world. Is it possible to say with this, I want
Yeah, so-
machine in a particular place, and where can I put them?
Yeah, you can always choose that. So if we go through the process of just very quickly. Do we have time, guys? Are we good with time? Okay. So if you want to create so you see there's a marketplace over here. You can choose things from the marketplace as well, which will take you to a WordPress or a Node website. But if you're going to create a web app, one of the first steps is to decide location down here. Now at the moment it's locked down because I am under a specific instance or a specific account. But the idea is that down here there's a responsive design for you. Location West Europe, and there's from there you can choose whichever location you want. It's not restricted to where you run or where you register your account. You can go anywhere you want in the world. Also, quite a few services like the blob storage and the SQL database have auto geo-replication, which means that you can choose where your data is going to be replicated automatically. So there's always 3 copies of your data. One is on the current instance, one is a second instance on the same data center, and one is a third instance on a different data center. And these are all managed automatically for you, which means that if something goes down, you're never going to find out. Your data is not going to be lost. Yes?
You pay data transfer between regions.
Sorry?
You pay data transfer between regions.
At the moment, there's no easy way to transfer stuff, so you have to redeploy the same site or the same service if you need to. Or you can create some backend tools. For example, we did a SQL cluster for a client where they wanted some geo-replication that they would manage everything themselves. So we set up a job which would do a SIP login to a different data center, and that was all managed by us.
But you pay for the transfer costs between regions.
It's minimal. You have to have terabytes of data to pay for the cost. And then again, the benefit of having a DR sitting somewhere around the world and your clients having instant access to that data without using more than 5 or 10 seconds of access to your site, I think it pays major dividends if you're a big company and you rely on presence on the web.
Can you put a hard limit on your costs? If you get unexpected popularity, can you?
You can have a ceiling, yes, and you get alerts on that. But if you reach that point and you're making so much, you generate so much traffic, then I think you have enough money to cover for those costs. Unless if somebody's hacking your site, in which case you don't want to. Yeah, there's a cap on that. Please.
So I used to work for a Windows shop, and I always thought that Microsoft's developer-facing tools were pretty good. And so bringing as you're bringing the potential to do like staging and deployment inside their development environment, that was just something that was very exciting. exciting and also different to any other set of web services out there. Can you let me know, what are the other things that the platform does really well? What are the things which differentiate it from a competing product?
For single developers doing work, the idea of staging is quite important, and there's a very good there's a blog post and there's also a nice video that shows you that not only .NET applications but also Node apps and PHP apps can take advantage of the staging environment to be able to deploy to a different server, or you can even manage your traffic automatically. So say if you wanted 10% of your traffic to go onto your new deployment and 90% to go on the old deployment, still running in parallel and get some analytics at the back of that, then that's quite easy. What else does
there some experimentation support then? A/B testing? And
that's what I'm saying. So if you want to do A/B testing, then you can have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different staging environments, and then you can name them as whatever you want, and then you can have parallel tracks deploying to all these staging environments, and then you can say, I want that much of traffic to go to my main website, but I also want to see what the people's reaction is if I change the color on this background, or how many people are going to press that button. There's also a very nice built-in set of analytics tools that you get from Azure website, which I'm happy to show you on my site, which is built in when you create an app. The things I open over here are called blades. Anyway, that's what Microsoft decided to call them. So down here you get a nice breakdown of how much traffic you get on your website. It also does a nice reporting on how many errors you get on the site.
So can you see that partitioned by staging environment or?
Yes. So down here you can see there's also the option to add alerts and edit the chart. So you can say I want also to, you can do per hour, you can see CPU time, data in, data out, HTTP errors or HTTP messages, and so on and so on. That's nicely built into the app, and I think supports all the stacks. So quite a few things out of the box and quite a few things free for you to get started, and that's the biggest benefit. And I think the layout and the interface is quite nice to AWS. Nothing against AWS, I'm using it right now, so I'm quite happy with that. But my cloud of preference is Azure for obvious reasons. Also, one last thing, if you're an MSDN subscriber, then you get tons of benefits. MSDN is if you got your MSDN subscription from Microsoft, then there's a lot of free credits, and you can run a lot of things for free that would cost you otherwise set the pennies. But that's me. If you have any other questions, guys, please feel free to come and see me afterwards, and we can have a chat. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, we shall have a 10-minute break, and then Mark will be entertaining us for nearly 3 hours, I think.
And don't forget your pro-site classes. Also, you have Google or Gmail or
That's fine.
In effect, there's no relation, right? So how long will it take you to start your own server? There you go, sir. Thank you very much.
Like I said, Amazon is nice, but I don't find it in any way, so I don't think it would help. I think it's just that sort of, you know, it is 10%.
The instructor guys, there's one pack. Everybody wants to collect it and free. Two signs for real experience. On the side. Way back. There's probably be fast now all the time yeah, I'm running windows down. Yeah. It's very powerful, and the typically the best instructions in the setting and the best instructions all together.
which I didn't mind. I was using my own I'm using summary.
Alright.
Nice. So maybe we should funny when I was doing demos at some point, and I was at a conference, I was doing demos on that, so I just started, I was doing just crossing down the IDs and I started working. So I was running demos. Just recorded beforehand. Well, some people are frustrated by the so say you go to your website and sign up to your website. Like for my database, I want to go and see my database. So you have to close down all of that. So you have Azure Mobile Services, the backend, which is an API, REST API. They also provide you with free reviews for the iOS Android taking advantage of the stuff. So I want my own backend with my own logic, but I want to push a token back to the user. So once it connects, then you can see the items out. It's also
Okay. Okay.
Sure, that's fine.
I was wondering if something happened.
Okay, folks, we're ready to get started.
Ladies and gentlemen, he's trying to get your attention.
I'm polite, she's noisy. Right, we're ready to get started again. Okay, Mark is going to give us our second talk, which is about how to give talks, and at the end of it, you'll all go up to him and say, I want to talk at TechMeetUp.
Thank you very much. Okay. Hi, my name is Mark. Picture of Ed Sheeran. I've been told that he looks a bit like me. And he's part of the reason why this talk is called Thinking Out Loud. But the other reason is that it's actually a pretty good description of what giving a talk is. It's taking the ideas, concepts, thoughts in your head and verbalizing them in such a way that your audience will hopefully understand them and form some similar ideas and concepts in their own head. So that's what it's called. I have been giving talks for years of various different types. So I've given pitches when I was at uni, I've given a lot of technical talks at work. And last year I had to give what we call a transfer of information to the people who were going to take over from the project I was working on, which involved basically 2 weeks in being in this one room with the other guys and trying to dump everything I learned in the last 4 years so that they understand it, which was interesting. So I'm hoping that I will be able to transfer some information about what I have sort of learned about giving talks to you, such that by the end of this you will know a bit more about that. Yeah, so is TechMeetUp? I think everyone here is involved in technology in some way or another. But I think when we think about technology and the way it's produced, we often think about the end products, the web pages, web apps, the phone apps, phones themselves, gadgets, computers, the gizmos, all of these things. That's what we tend to think about, but the reality is none of these things happen without processes that really rely on communication, and usually verbal communication kind of boils down to. You can't really get any of this done without speaking to your customers, speaking to your colleagues, speaking to your bosses, and trying to explain to them what it is you're doing, or trying to understand what they want, that kind of thing. But at the same, giving talks is a really good way to train that skill, and yet giving talks is also, for many people, their number one fear over death. And it doesn't seem to me that's really justified. I mean, talking is something you do to your friends, your family, your colleagues, all day long, and it's never a big kind of deal when you do it there. Giving a talk is really just doing the same thing, but with a bit more preparation and a little more structure. So, oh yeah, and there are lightning talks next month. You should all give a lightning talk. I am hoping that by the end of this, you will now understand how to give a talk, or at least how to put together a basic talk, and therefore we'll have no excuse not to give a lightning talk, and we'll have lots of lightning talks, and like, okay, yeah, anyway. So I'm going to cover really just the basics. I'm not looking to get you to like a TED level talk. what I'm gonna so we'll start with the actual basic structure, which is this basic kind of 3-act talk structure. We're very familiar, but what you do when kind of is important and matters, and hopefully will give you something to work from. It's maybe not the perfect structure or the best or the only structure you can use, but it's something you can start from and then develop based on what your talk is actually about. I'll then cover some tips and tricks that will hopefully get you to produce quite good, or at least understandable talk that people will be interested in and will listen to all the way through. And then I want to show you how all these things come together and how they apply to something like a talk like this. Or, for example, lightning talks that you might want to give next month, right? So, if you've got any questions about what I'm talking about, particularly if you want to clear something up, feel free to ask as we're going. But don't be surprised if I mention I'm going to cover it later or leave it to the end because it's a bigger talk for a bigger discussion. Okay. All right. Who knows which film trilogy this is, or this is referring to? Star Trek.
Star Wars.
Yes, this is Star Wars. Okay, okay. So everyone with Star Wars, there are 3 films. They're great. You almost think that they make more, but thankfully they haven't. And they're a great example of the 3-act story or talk structure that we're going to use. You've got your beginning, where Luke discovers he is the chosen one. You got the middle, where he discovers that not only is he the chosen one, he has some interesting family stuff going on. And in the end, he resolves that conflict with his father and saves the day, and they blow up moons more, or that's not a moon, more than once. But also each of the films also have the same beginning, middle, and end. So you probably, if you've seen the films, you probably all have strong notions of what happens at the beginning of each one, roughly what happens in the middle, and then the big finales at the end. They're all very clearly structured and signposted as you go through. So that is what we're going to go for. So in the beginning, you are really looking to get your audience invested and interested, and sort of to make them understand why you're spending however much time talking about things. And the best way to do that is start by introducing yourself and giving them some idea as to why you might have a reason to talk about what you're talking about, some kind of credibility. It doesn't have to be much. You don't have to be the world expert to give a talk on anything. It can even be something as simple as, I read about this and I thought it was really cool, so I read a bit more about it, and I'm now really excited, so I'm going to tell you about it, even though I'm just learning about it. And once you've done that, you then need to try and provide a hook for your audience to kind of latch into. This is your pitch, or this is the thing that is going to make them care about what you're then going to continue to talk about. It's giving them that, just that little bite of interest. Once you kind of set the scene and kind of explain where you're going, it's a really good idea to give your audience an overview of what you're going to talk about. And this serves a couple of purposes. One is that people are really bad at remembering things, particularly talks. They tend to fade out pretty much in the middle. It's hard for us to really pay attention for longer than about 20 minutes. But what we're really good at doing is remembering the starts of things and the ends of things. So if you talk about what you're going to talk about at the start, at the very least, they'll hopefully remember a bit about what you were at least going to talk about, even if they don't remember the tables in the middle. The other thing is that by giving them that structure, they also know how far through the talk we are and how much longer they have to sit there. So at this point, we're almost about a third of the way through. And you know that because I told you. Oh yeah, you might also want to talk a bit about the kind of questions you're going to handle or how you want this talk to go. Yeah, so in the middle, this is the meat of your talk. Initially, I was just going to sort of leave a response in there and say, and obviously your talk is your talk, so you're just going to have to figure it out yourself. And then I realized actually, I usually have a bit of a structure or approach to how I kind of do these things. My general advice is to try and have your talk kind of build on itself as you go through from beginning to in the middle into the end. So at the start, you might want to start with some basic structure, or you might want to provide some historical context or an explanation of what the status quo is, with the idea that once you've got that in place, you can then pick it apart, disagree with it, or explain why your cool new tech is that much better than what we've got. You start with getting everyone up to basically the same level. And yeah, once you've got them there, then just try to kind of maintain this sense of flow, building on what you've already said and showing how what you've done applies to what you've already talked about, and referring back and kind of hopefully building up something that is quite more elaborate as you go along. Finally, at the end, you've got ending. You kind of want to continue that flow until you get to a point where there is a natural conclusion or kind of end point. If you can have like a big mic drop moment where you kind of pull the reveal and go, "Look, this is amazing. That's great." More often than not, that's hard to really pull off, and it's best just to kind of say, "Okay, that's how these things come together." The key thing is that by the end of your talk, the stuff that you set up at the beginning, the hook, that kind of question of why they should be interested, that should be answered and that should be resolved. And to help drive that home, remember I said people are really bad at remembering things, right? Well, you're going to repeat everything that you just told them again. You're going to have a summary where you repeat those key points and make sure people remember them and take them away. Because again, people are really bad at remembering things. The pithy statement that summarizes this is to tell them what you're going to tell them, and then to tell them what you just told them. So, maybe you'll remember that. Yeah, and that'll take you to the end. That's you in your talk, you say thank you, whatever. Chances are you're going to have questions and answers, and it's usually a good idea to try and think ahead about what some of these might be. You might even have extra slides if you're super prepared, and a good tip for that is if you've got slides that you had to drop out of your talk because they just didn't fit or didn't make sense, you can just stick them at the end and refer to them, which is useful. Right, so tips and tricks. It's a talk, not a, oh, okay. See what I did there. Yeah, this is the key thing, and this is one of the key points I'm going to leave you with at the end. Remember that this is a talk, it's not a read. You need to prepare it as a talk as well. You need to think about, I'm going to go and I'm going to say a bunch of things. There's nothing more frustrating than, possibly been in university lectures or other talks where it's just like a wall of words and bullet points, and you just read every single word one at a time, and you're done with the slide, and you know exactly what they're going to spend the next 5 minutes saying, and yet they still feel the need to just say every single word. So, focus on the talk itself. Bullet points are useful. They're both useful for you. They're useful also for your audience to help reinforce key things, but they're not your talk itself. And then this kind of ties into the next bit. You want to keep practicing, and ideally you want to practice as orally and verbally as possible. So for example, for the last 2 or 3 days, I have basically been sitting talking to myself on the way to work, cafe this afternoon, just sort of talking myself through it, trying to, and this is good because a lot of the time the obvious way to make a talk is to go and sit in front of your word processor and type out 2 or 3 pages of words and remember it as a speech. And the thing is, the way that we communicate in writing is quite different to the way that we communicate verbally. So by actually talking these things through, you start to figure out, well, actually, what I've just written there makes no sense. That's not how anyone would say that. It makes more sense to say it like this, and this flows more naturally. And also, while you're talking it through, all these things start to get lodged in your memory. You have a kind of muscle memory about saying those words before, so when it comes to giving the talk, you kind of just give the words. Pace yourself. How am I doing? Okay. Oh, I've done 10,000 steps. That's not one. You want to ideally not go too fast and not too slow. It's very, especially with the adrenaline and the sugar and the caffeine kicks in, it's very easy to find yourself talking far faster than you need to, and I've probably been doing that. I'm sorry. But it is important to kind of take time, especially when little bits like when you go on a new slide, you can often find yourself sort of stumbling into it as you read the slide and figure out what you're supposed to be saying. And sometimes it's nice to just pause for a minute, read it silently, let your audience start to read it, and then start speaking once you get the flow of what you're going to say again. The next hint, a bit needless, comes from Strunk and White's The Elements of Style. They have a rule which is omit needless words. And the idea behind that is to emphasize that you want to really communicate clearly and effectively. You want to try to focus on what really matters. So all these extraneous, fancy words that end with ly, or the complicated ways of phrasing things can sound really impressive, but they don't necessarily communicate your point across as clearly as they should be. And this applies to talks as well, in that it's easy to get bogged down in a lot of details about the thing you're talking about, especially if you're quite into it and you know all about yourself. The reality is most of the time your audience is maybe going to get about half of it at best. They're probably going to remember the key things, and then they're going to Google it later or they'll ask you questions. So really, you just want to focus on those things that you really want to remember. Details of an API probably aren't really going to be remembered. They can always look at it. That the API exists at all, that's a useful thing. And if in doubt, follow the rule of threes, which I have spectacularly not followed here because this is an exception. So the rule of threes is basically humans are like things in threes, or we're quite happy. It's just enough that it feels like it's something. It's not so little that it's nothing. It's also not so much that you start to feel overwhelmed. So if you're wondering about how many bullet points should I have, how many sections should I break this into, start with 3, figure out if it's appropriate. If you've got more things that you need to cover, add more, that's okay. Right. This is the bit where the talk gets a little meta. So, I've just talked about the structure, I've talked a bit about some of the tips and tricks, or ideas around how you can make a talk slightly better. I'm now going to go through everything I've done and show you how those things kind of worked. So here's the beginning, here's the slide, here's me telling you about myself and kind of why I kind of know a bit about giving talks. So, I'm not edgier. This is me then trying to get you interested in why it might be interesting to learn about how to give a talk, so you can give a lightning talk next month. This is the basic structure that I wanted to cover. So you can now see that we are under the application. We're almost at the end, guys. Here's Star Wars. Here is I've broken the 3 things I wanted to, well, the 3-act structure, happily broke into that 3-phase kind of thing. I've got 3 bullet points here, lots of those 3s. Kind of focusing on these key things. I have updated one sponsor. And here's the last slide that we looked at, tips and tricks with all that stuff. So you can see I had that structure. This was the meat in the middle, and we're basically back to where we are. We're kind of at the end. I'm not going to show you the end slides yet because you're going to see them just now, but trust me, they're there. There you go. That's how you apply a structure like that to to a talk like this. For a lightning talks are a lot faster than only 5 minutes. Given a sample kind of breakdown, 1 minute for your kind of beginning section, a minute at the end to kind of repeat the key things that you've said, and then you've got 3 minutes in the end, the 3 number, to kind of actually cover your talk. You might, if you're going to do slides, then you might have 5 slides. I would say, unless you've got something very specific in mind, 5 slides is going to be more than enough. And I would say, I've done lightning talk type things where I've just had 1 slide, or I've had a whiteboard and I've had a little scribble on it, and that's pretty much all I've done. And that's worked quite well. I wouldn't worry too much about having you don't want to have too much stuff for a lightning talk. You want it to be nice and kind of neat, because you'll find that 5 minutes goes very fast. Yeah. So, there you go. That's how you give a basic talk. That's your structure. That's your, some advice. That's how you apply it. Have a beginning, a middle, and an end with kind of, and make sure you hit those things where you're getting people invested, you're building up through the talk, and then you're concluding in a way that sort of hopefully satisfies that question that was opened at the start. Talk, don't read. This is the exception, because that's the important thing, right? It's a talk. Focus on the talk side of it. You can use your slides to begin with to kind of get the rough structure, but the slides should be by the way. You should be ideally able to walk down the street on the way to work and give the talk without actually being able to see your slides. And yes, finally, we're having lightning talks next month. Now that everyone knows how to give a basic talk, I'm hoping that you will be encouraged to come and give me your contact details, and then we can get you set up for next month. And if you have been so enthused by this talk, then in fact you want to give a full talk sometime later in the year, come and talk to me anyway, and we'll get you sorted on that as well. Yeah, so there you go. How to give a talk. Thank you very much. Okay.
My question was, what's the best way of practicing how to give a talk? I was looking up there for the answer. Do a lightning talk.
Yes, good. Yes. Very good. Archie.
You used humour a number of different times in the talk with the issue counter and other things. I'm also curious, peeking behind the curtain, did you rehearse the line about 10,000 steps or not?
No, that was literally my pacing back and forth triggered my Fitbit into saying 10,000 steps. I was not expecting that. I was expecting it to tell me the time, which is, well, now tell me, yes, it's 20 feet. Yes. But yes, I did use humor. Humor, makes things more bearable. And hopefully it was at least slightly entertaining. Any other questions?
Last one.
Or Ben?
Have you thought about buying a functioning watch?
That's totally what. It's just when it hits 10,000, the first thing it tells you when you press the button is that it's 10,000 steps. Which I didn't know, because I only got this like a week ago. Anyone other than Archie? Yes, Christoph.
Right, so it was a very nice introduction about how to go about speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any advice to people that are extremely shy or introvert and they have to give talks to people in the company, or get up and speak, because that's a very daunting thing? A lot of people freeze when they go up there. So, any advice to them?
Practice. I would say that I'm usually naturally quite introverted. I'm happiest with a computer game or a book or just sort of pulling up. But I've been performing for one reason or another since I was a kid, and I think I just kind of got used to it by exposure. It's not the kind of position that I would ideally would not have liked to have had to have given this talk. Great if there happened to have been a second talk for this one. But this was tied in quite nicely next month, so I'm happy to give it. It's just practice. It's just a case of taking a little risk. Maybe don't, if you're worried about talking in front of lots of people, maybe a lightning talk next month is not necessarily what you want to do. Maybe you want to give a smaller talk to some friends Maybe if you're in a work context, you can give like a short tech talk. But even you'll probably find in a work context sometimes you have to explain something to other people. And sometimes, and that's a good opportunity to prepare a really short talk. It might just be a couple of minutes, and think about it with the structure and just, I'm going to prepare this, I'm going to go and give it, and the more you do it, the easier it gets. It is just a case of practice. Unless you've got like a critical anxiety condition, there's not much you can do than see a doctor to get rid of it. I'm not an expert. James.
So just on that point, actually, some people who are shy do find it, the structure of giving a talk is actually better for going up, is easier to do than going up and talking to people at a conference or something. And so there is a set of slides called the Shy Connector for people who are a bit introverted. And that's actually one of the tips they give. If you're at a big conference and you're a bit scared of networking, give people a reason to talk to you. And I've done this. I've gone on conferences and given talks just so people come talk to me afterwards.
Yeah, I would also say that if you're shy, another good way to kind of get past that bit is to volunteer and help. You start to meet people that are also involved and well connected with other people, and you're also helping. It's great. It gives you something to do. Tim.
I was just going to add, for public speaking, what's helped for me is work out the biggest number of people you can have you chat to in a group, if that's 6, 10, and then kind of break the audience down into that many, and then you're just talking to a bunch of, you're kind of doing 6 conversations at once.
You catch that, so yeah, figure out what you're happy with, break the audience up into groups like that, and just, suddenly it's a lot more manageable. How many more questions?
One more?
Yeah, I just want to say that a nice way to do it is there's a non-profit organization called Toastmasters. Sorry if I stole your thunder.
No,
but what they do is actually provide you a structured environment where you go and learn how to speak, and they're very supportive. So they can highlight the things that you do right and the things that you do wrong, and they can help you out if you have a big talk to give at work and you're going to give it in front of 200 people, and it's quite daunting doing it for the first time. So doing it through them, it's quite interesting. I believe that there should be a couple of groups in Edinburgh that can help you with that.
Okay, James.
I was just going to say as well, if you're wanting to practice talks too, there's lots of small meetups in Edinburgh. So if you think TechMeetUp is too big a crowd, there's like the Go Meetup, PHP Meetup. So all those looking for speakers, that's an opportunity to practice a smaller crowd.
Right. Okay, that brings the evening to a close. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Skyscanner, Informatics Ventures and Cultivate. And I'd also like to thank all you for turning up. And you can be thanked again if you turn up next month, the second Wednesday. We will be in here again. And we have lightning talks. And that's about it. Some of us will be going to the pear tree afterwards, so if you're vaguely sociable, it's that. If you're not sociable, we don't care. And that's it. Bye, folks.